Greetings, this is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to share with you an email I got a while back. This person is a retired fish and game biologist. They were approximately 10 years ago, they were up by the Mulchatna River. They were doing some smolt samples, which they go up into these lagoons and take samples of the little salmon, fry and study them or whatever. They were on their way up to do that, up towards the headwaters of like Nushagak River. And as they were coming up on the Mulchatna River, which is a branch that goes off to the east from the Nushagak River, it's almost perfectly parallel with the Nuyakuk as well. all in the same area. Just it would be just north of Kaliganik, or well, east northeast. So as they were skiffing along, they see this human, what they thought was a person, come out of the river and run into the trees. And they thought, oh shit, let's go help this person. They just fell in some cold ass water. They're going to need some help, before they get hypothermic. So they go barreling in there, they beach and they going in there hollering for help. Hey, we're here to help. Come out. We got some blankets. We'll get you warm. Nothing. Dead quiet. So they're kind of confused. They're like, well, maybe this person is in shock. And being, trained in their field and whatnot, they most of them that were in the party of four had some kind of EMT training. So they're legitimately looking to help. Now, as they were following the trail, the water trail from the riverbank, because this is all happening like really fast. They see this person come out of the river. They go to help. I mean, it's immediately they're right on its heels to get this person help. And as they're following this dribbled water track into the trees, about 20 yards away, they hear some trees break. And they start yelling out, hey, we're over here. We're here to help. Dead silence. No birds chirping, no nothing. Middle of the day. And they all at the same time look at each other and go, we shouldn't be here. So they start backing up and they're yelling, hey, we're here. Come on out. If you need help, come on out. There's not a sound. So they retreat to the skiff and they back off and they circle around a couple times. And the second time they're circling around, all of a sudden, a big piece of tree comes flying and damn near hits them in the boat. So immediately they're spooked. They go out into the main channel. They circle around again a little further away, and this being comes out. And it comes out, and it is guesstimated over 10 foot tall, acting very aggressively, real big heaving breaths, and just making these weird sounds. Kind of like an imitation of a squirrel and an owl at the same time. They said it was bewildering how intense the sound was because they didn't see a lot of movement from its mouth. And so as they were kind of pondering what they're going to do, because none of them at that particular instance was really scared. They were more in awe because they were in a safe place, a skiff circling around. Well, they kick it down to idle just to stay with the current and look at this thing. And as it's heaving these big breaths, it runs back into the trees. And they all just look at each other like, what the fuck? What do we do with this shit? So they go on about their way. They continue upriver. They do their thing. On their way back, they came across another crew that was going up to check the weir counting station. And the weir counter is just LiDAR. They roll these tracks out on the bottom of the river, and it counts salmon for them instead of someone physically standing up on a tower like they used to do and counting salmon. So they run across them. They tell them what happened. And the people that they came across, it was just above the Mulchatna, just up above Harris Creek. And there's plenty of encounters from this area, tons and tons. A night at Harris Creek, for example, my experience on the Nuyakuk, my cousin Nikolai's experience on it. I mean, just that whole area. So as they're talking to these observers, they're warning them, hey, we saw fucking Sasquatch just over here on the Mulchatna. Be aware. Keep your wits about you. Shit's real. And the observers thought, these biologists were playing a prank. Um, they did not believe them one bit. They're like, yeah, we're not falling for that shit. We're not falling for it. They said, hey, just be aware. We're not fucking with you, man. We got better things to do than blow smoke up your ass. We're in the middle of nowhere here. Open your eyes, open your ears, and be aware. They figured they were being shined on, so they went on their way. Well, approximately 3 days later, they were at the Wood River Landing in Dillingham, gearing up to go run up towards. I don't remember exactly. They were doing the same thing, though. They're basically looking for smolts and checking the growth of the salmon and whatever they were doing in the study. Now, at the landing, those observers were coming back. Now, coming down the Nushagak, they have to come back up the Wood River a little ways to get to the Wood River Landing. Sometimes, depending on tide, it's easier just to go to the Wood River Landing versus fucking with the harbor and whether it's been dredged enough and all that kind of shit. So they opted for the Wood River Landing. So as the original biologists are loading up their stuff, getting ready to launch their skiff, here comes those observers. And they are pissed. They thought the biologist had some guy in a fucking ghillie suit pranking them. They were like, no one's pranking you, man. And the observers are like, well, what do we do? Who do we report it to? And the biologist said, whoever. That no one's gonna take us seriously. Who's gonna take you seriously? And so they have a debate on who do they talk to, because I guess the observers had something very similar happen to them when they went up the Nuyakuk. Now, they were just going to the first salmon counting little bunkhouse area to get the equipment rolled out. They weren't there to hang out or anything. It was strictly get the equipment set up, get it lined out. And I guess when they were pulling equipment from the skiff up onto the riverbank, something very similar happened outside of coming out of the water, but it came out of the trees and was heaving real big, making these weird noises. And so they didn't even get the equipment set up. They retreated back to the skiff, pulled away from the bank, and then came back a few minutes later after the thing went away, because it came out, it showed itself, turned around, and left after they retreated back. So they do their thing. Nothing else happens at that moment. And as they're leaving after setting up, and this takes, it's a process. They got to roll out the LiDAR. They got all this shit to do. Well, they were setting up the receiver or something like that. They just get done, and they get down the tower, and they're coming back to the skiff. And as they get loaded into the skiff, there's a scream that happens. Now, the scream happens, and they immediately push off. They were all loaded, so they pushed off, and they were backing away from the riverbank because it's an elevated riverbank. They couldn't see past a certain area. So when they got away from the riverbank, they could see further back. And at the tree line, there's this thing again, heaving, just this big heaving. And it started doing this melodic scream. It was like a whoop, whoop, just constant, repetitive whooping kind of scream. They didn't know what the hell to do. So they kind of all stuck looking. And according to this person, there's footage of this somewhere. They had a flip phone with some kind of camera on it, and they recorded part of it. I requested the footage. I don't know if I'll get it or not, because they weren't connected with the other people who took the footage. So anyway, these people retreated out of there after trying to film it or whatever. And so as they're talking about what happened to them at the Wood River Landing, one of the Fish and Game troopers showed up, who was going along with the biologist or whoever else on this smolt little finding thing, whatever study they were doing. And the Fish and Game trooper that showed up, they immediately accost him and say, hey, look, we saw Sasquatch, we saw the hairy man, whatever. This is what happened. And the Fish and Game trooper just looked at him and was like, end. Like they were really confused at the nonchalant end. What do you do with that? Because no one's gonna report this shit, and that's so aggravating. I mean, even professional biologists in the field, observers, all these people that go out here and experience this shit. Who do they talk to? Who do they report it to? No one is taking them. And if someone is taking a report, it's their own personal little report in their head. Okay, you saw one over here. Okay, I saw one over there. That type of shit. No one is actively sharing this information as it happens. This shit happened 10 years ago, and the person that shared it with me is still leery. Didn't really want me to state their job, but it's like, I mean, they agreed. I'm not just putting them out on blast. I wouldn't do that to someone. That's just fucked up. They no longer work in the field or whatever, but still, how many professionals out there today are dealing with this shit and got no one to tell about it? No one to tell. Even as I sit here, I'm not super remote, but I'm remote enough. I got, flower patches behind me, berry bushes, tundra, trees. Who knows what's over this fucking hill? Point being is there's nowhere to really confide and report these things with the legitimate authoritative entity of any kind. Essentially it breaks down to eventually they share it with someone like me or their friends and family. But what do you do with this shit? There's going to come a tipping point where the avalanche of evidence is going to be so overwhelming, something will have to be done. Almost sounds like a... Oh, okay, never mind. So, what do you do with that? I mean, you have a group of 4 that are in the biology field, like legit. And then you got the observers who are, a subset of these observers who are putting out the equipment that they check their data on. But they're dismissed. The fish and game trooper that they tried to confide in, he wasn't dismissive, but he had nowhere to take it. He had nowhere to take the information. He had nothing that he was going to be able to do on paper. Nothing. And that happens for so many people. I wonder how many fucking people out there, not that they're fucking people, but how many people out there have an experience as simple as, nothing. How many people are seeing something in the distance and it takes off? Probably more than we can even count. How many people have had these things scream at them in the deep woods and they ain't gonna tell nobody? They ain't gonna tell nobody because no one's gonna fucking believe them. And until a lot of people, they want the physical evidence. Oh, I need to see something tangible, and you got to be careful what you wish for. You go out looking for this shit, you just may find it. Aggravating stuff. Anyway, I shared that with you to share the main experience I wanted to share with you. There's this story of eons ago, 20 plus years ago, of the Mulchatna screamer. Now, what was told to me by an elder is it was for a total of about 3 to 4 years straight, in this particular area on the Mulchatna River, just above the mouth of it, just as it starts getting to narrow before it goes back into the Mulchatna Hills. Now, as it was told to me, there was this guy, his name was Albert, and he went up the Mulchatna in hopes of gold prospecting, gold panning. So he got himself a little camp set up. His little camp setup was strictly business. He was there to sluice and pan and leave. He wasn't there for, wildlife photography, none of that shit. And he had been led to believe that the Mulchatna Hills have some ancient riverbed areas and creek areas that are rich in gold. So going on this information, Albert, he goes, he sets up his camp. He's got his little wire mesh for his homemade sluice box and all this other shit, all lined out in camp. It took a couple days to set up. And so he's literally taking the small tin pail back and forth to the Mulchatna Hills, getting core samples of dirt. And he's piling it up in a good sized pile next to his sluicing area, right? And so he's got this pile. It's according to what was told to me, it was a good 4 foot tall, 8 foot round dirt pile to where he had material to work. So he didn't have to stop and fuck around and go back and forth. He had a whole bunch of pay dirt right next to his station. So he was going back for a couple more pails and was going to start his sluicing and then take what he got and, move on. So he's gone a couple hours getting this stuff, his material. He comes back. Now, the Mulchatna Hills aren't very big. They're kind of rolling hills, but there's a group of them. It's kind of hard to explain. You have to look at the topographical. But Mulchatna River is like 146 miles long or something like that. But it's not very deep. It's not very wide once you get up in there. So where he was getting his material was in a narrower part. His skiff had been drug up as far as he could with the motor tipped up because it was so shallow. And he had it anchored not too far from his spot. And so his trail was to go back up into the Mulchatna Hills, which approximately a mile and a half away where he was getting this pay dirt and bringing it back. But the reason I bring it up is the trail cuts right along that creek. Well, river, but it's at the headwaters of it. And so you have all these other small little streams and creeks feeding into it, right? And so he had to cross a bunch of these. And as he's crossing back, he's coming back to the his sluice area with his last couple buckets. He notices fresh, wet tracks from he couldn't make it out. He wasn't overly paying attention, but he was aware of bear. And so he had his pistol on his hip at all times, and he had a rifle that he left at his camp. As he's going along, he figures, oh, okay, a bear came through here and is heading towards my camp, but my food's all put up, I'm good, and thought nothing of it. Just keeping an eye out for this bear. He comes back and gets to camp, and his 4 foot by 8 foot pile of pay dirt spread everywhere. I mean, it was like someone just came and swiped it in all different directions. His sluice shit was all knocked over, and that the sluice was damaged, and the pile of dirt was spread, and nothing else appeared to be touched. And he's looking around like, what the fuck? Why would a bear do this? And then he saw the tracks in the dirt that had been flung. There's fresh, human-like, huge, according to what I was told, they were over 20 inches in length, these human-looking tracks. Very wide heel, the routine. And they went off in the direction of where his skiff was. Now, he could almost see where his skiff is from where he was standing when he noticed the tracks. So he runs a few yards, has his gun out, and is looking for his skiff and doesn't see it. So he's panicking. He runs down the river along the bank, and he sees his skiff just kind of getting pushed gently. Something had broken the rope, and it was just kind of slowly drifting away, but it wasn't like detrimental. It wasn't like getting away from him. So he runs down there, grabs it by the broken piece of rope, drags it back, pulls out another line, anchors it to the bank, and starts looking around. Goes back up, follows those tracks. Those tracks lead directly away from his camp and into a scrub of trees, like an island of black spruce and some willows and shit. And he's looking at this little island of trees in the tundra just back from his camp. You got to understand, in this area, there's a lot of muskeg, tree-lined muskeg. And so it was an area like that. So he comes around the tree line where his camp is, muskeg for about almost 100 yards, and then this other stand of trees. Now, How it was explained to me is he had retrieved his rifle when he came out to follow these tracks, and there was big deep impressions in the mossy stuff like this. If you can see that, we got thick moss everywhere, but he could see the impressions in this mossy material, and there's just a beeline straight to the stand of trees. So he's got his rifle, his pistol, and he wants to figure out what the fuck. He automatically, when he saw the tracks, Bigfoot. He Albert is not an ignorant guy, from what I was told, um, but a little too adventurous, a little too curious. So he gets about half the distance. So he's about 50 yards from the stand of trees now. And he sees movement in behind the trees, but he can't make it out. So he starts yelling, "Hey, hey, I'm Albert so-and-so. Let's talk. What'd you do this for?" Nothing, not a sound. And so he squats down. He's trying to contemplate, man, do I go closer or do I leave? Because his curiosity had the best of him. And he decides he's going to go closer. So as soon as he stands up, he slings the rifle over his shoulder and takes 2 steps, and all of a sudden the screaming starts. Starts in front of him from the stand of trees, and from behind him, another scream. A smaller, he said, according to what was said to me, a smaller scream, meaning something smaller screamed in return. And so immediately he's walking parallel in between both these screams to circle back around to his camp. He wants to go now. So he takes the long way around to his camp, which took him approximately almost an hour, because he did not want any close contact because of the nature of the scream. It didn't sit right with him, not at all. So he takes this hour-long detour, comes back to his camp. There's new tracks in that dirt that was spread, varying sizes. He felt that there was a total of 4 different size tracks, and he wanted no part of it. So he has his outside of his food, which was in a small drum with a screw-tight lid of some kind, just bear-proof, that he had hanging in a tree, was no longer there when he came back. The rope had been torn, just ripped, and he's basically gathering up some stuff, right? Now, as he's gathering stuff, it dawned on him, oh, my skiff is further down now because one of these things broke the line. So he's got this going on in the back of his mind. There's active screaming going on from that island of trees. It didn't ever really stop. It would, one scream, short pause, another scream, short pause, a smaller scream from inside the tree line by his camp. So he's got I'm trying to put myself in his shoes to imagine what it's like to have this going on while you're trying to collect your shit and leave. And so he feels like every scream is more and more directed at him. And he's yelling back out, "Hey, I'm leaving. Leave me alone. I'm leaving. Fuck your dirt, fuck your gold, all this shit. I want nothing to do with it. Just leave me alone." He kept just yelling that. So he's gathering up his stuff, and he's going down to the bank, and it dawns on him the skiff is further down the river. Something ripped the line again, and his skiff was just gingerly just binging along, not moving faster by any means. It's just not tied to the shore anymore. So immediately he's like, fuck. So he grabs his backpack with his most important shit, slings a rifle, and grabs his emergency bag with flares and some other shit in it, and runs for the skiff. As he's running to the skiff, he hears screaming going on behind him, and it sounds like it's barreling down on him. So he turns around, swings his rifle in that direction. There's nothing. And off to his left, at the tree line, they're stomping and breaking of shit, and he can barely see movement in between these trees. And he's like, man, leave me alone. He's trembling, and he fires a shot off in that direction. Boom! Just making noise, basically. From what I was told, he wasn't shooting at it. It was just making noise. So as he continues along, the screaming starts again. Now, he's not far from his skiff, but he's so mentally wrapped up in what's behind him that he's having a hard time focusing on getting to the skiff. He keeps stutter stepping. He fell down a few times. And as he's running along the riverbank, there's only game trails that kind of weave in and out from the riverbank. There's no concise line right on that riverbank edge, for him to. So he's running around all this shit, and he finally gets just below his skiff, catches his breath a little bit, steps down the riverbank, and stops his skiff from continuing on, pulls it over, pulls it up on shore a little better. And he's only in a little 18-foot lund, which, by yourself can be a pain to manage, but it's not impossible. What would it be? It's like a V-hull in the front and goes to a flat bottom in the back. So he pulls it up, and he's loading his stuff up, and a scream happens again right behind him. He said, according to what was told to me, it felt like it was standing on his back and screaming through him, is how it felt to the guy. Now, terrified, this guy Albert swings around and starts shooting because he felt he was in imminent danger. So he turns around, he just starts unloading his rifle just randomly, which is not a smart thing to do, but the guy was panicked. So he empties his rifle, re-slings it over his shoulder, and is yelling, explicitives, just, fuck, get the fuck out of here, I'm leaving. So he gets the skiff, he maneuvers it, swings it around, and basically, because of the shallow depth of where he's at, because he's way up there, he has to use oars to push himself along because it's too shallow to drop the outboard and rip out of there. So as he's pushing along with the oars, he's got his pistol and rifle right on the bench seat at his feet, and he's pushing along, continually looking around him. Now, he only gets about 50, 60 yards into this whole endeavor, and the scream happens again. And just so happens where he's at, there's a little bit of the bank lowers down, and there's a feeder creek that comes in. And at that point, when he drifts down to that point, he can see up that little creek a little ways, and he sees two of them jump across and into the tree line in front of him off to his right. As he's contemplating, well, shit, they're following me, he immediately became very emotional and was sobbing and was crying and almost kind of gave up. He stopped pushing along with the oar, dropped the oar into the skiff, and sat on the bench and was holding his rifle and had the pistol on his lap. And as this poor guy is contemplating, where do I go? Because he knows he has quite a bit of distance before it's deep enough to drop that kicker down and really make movement. And so he decides, well, I'm going to let the creek, I'm going to let the river bring me down. And once it gets deep enough, I'll drop the outboard and I'll just sit here and watch and wait and see and, kind of steer the skiff as best I can when I need to. As he's doing this, he hears the screaming again. It's below him and above him and almost right next to him. He's hearing these screaming is kind of like a howl, a growl howl kind of thing that ends in a high-pitched kind of thing. It's really weird. That dentist video I've been pointing out to people, that's a very good example of what I'm talking about, but you don't get the full spectrum of sound with the microphones. So as he's sitting there contemplating what do I do with this shit, he kept hearing stuff falling around, clumps of grass and dirt, sometimes rocks, sometimes branches will go whipping by over his head, and he felt like he was being toyed with. So periodically he would just stand up from his seated position on a little bench seat and fire shots into the trees just randomly, which not a good idea, but dude was freaked out, so whatever. This goes on for a while, and eventually he gets into deeper water where he can drop the kicker and he fires it up. Now, Right as he fires it up and he's starting to putter and get up on step in the channel, big big tree from he doesn't even know where comes flying out into the water, kind of lands in, and it has his waterway partially blocked. So he veers off to the left and tries to skiff around, almost loses the outboard because outboard hits and clips this tree. Now, he had to stick his hand back to keep the outboard from flipping up over into the boat, is how hard he hit. And so he stops that from happening. His transom's bent and the motor stalls out. He's worried that he broke the shaft for the outboard. And so he's got all this shit going on, this weird screaming happening periodically. And finally, he's able to right the outboard. He repumps it, restarts it. It fires up. It has a little bit of a wobble because the prop was bent, but it was moving. It was running, and he was fucking out of there. So that's what happened to Albert. He got out of there after that incident and everything. But that's how it was conveyed to me. I've heard other versions of it, and honestly, I don't know which one is accurate, but they all involve the same thing: screaming, being accosted, camp being torn up, food being stolen, and being run out. Now, these things probably could have had him easily. And that's another thing. Who knows? Boggling shit though, because most people get everything they say about it dismissed by those who are smart or know better. You know, you can't learn shit in a book. You can read a book about the outdoors all you fucking want, front to back. You can memorize that shit, but until you put your foot out into those fucking woods, man, you don't know dick. So just keep that in mind. No one's a fucking expert. Anyway, anyone who wants to share, AlaskaHairymanProject@gmail.com or NoComp907@gmail.com. T-shirts should be, according to Dave, they should be getting shipped out today, I believe. That was a pre-order thing. We're revamping that whole thing. We're looking at hats, coffee mugs, and some other shit as fundraising tools. Anyway, till the next one.